I'm not the one who's gonna get shot in the face by an unstoppable super weapon.
Be it in the show or the comics, the Invincible lore has a consistent streak of dropping new names every new season or comic issue. I mean, just think about all the new faces we've gotten to witness just in Season 4 itself. But out of all, I was really looking forward to seeing Space Racer in action against the Viltrumites. Now that the war between the Viltrumites and the Coalition of Planets has finally begun on a more one-on-one front, only comic readers truly understand the sheer mind-boggling stuff that's about to happen in the upcoming 2 episodes. Sure, the Graysons will always be the ones stealing the spotlight, and for all the right reasons, but it's actually Space Racer who's about to become one of the major catalysts for the destruction of the very planet of Viltrum itself. So without wasting another moment, let's discuss what makes Space Racer so powerful that he even makes the strongest race in the universe feel threatened. Who is Space Racer, and what makes him such an important linchpin among the 9 other Coalition heroes? While we don't know about his backstory before Omni-Man buried him under the rubble of an asteroid almost a century ago, we do know that Space Racer is an absolutely legendary cosmic nomad who was considered to be more of a name you hear in old stories than someone with a confirmed presence. Nobody in the current timeline of the show had seen Space Racer before Nolan joined the Coalition's mission and then went out with Alan to retrieve Space Racer's weapon, the Infinity Ray, after assuming that the alien was dead. But it only ended up releasing him from his captivity, and even then, he was ready to take down Nolan if it weren't for him being swayed to join the Coalition's cause against the Viltrumites. From what I understand, Space Racer is always ready to shed some Viltrumite blood, or in this case, more accurately, blast them off with his iconic gun. This alien loves to operate on his own, is extremely independent, very pragmatic, but tremendously ridden with trust issues, especially when it comes to Viltrumites. It also makes sense why he was so resentful towards Nolan when they met again, because hating someone who left you buried alone for 100 years really is not an overreaction. However, he was clearly not unreasonable, because when Nolan apologized for putting him through such an excruciatingly haunting experience, Space Racer was super shocked and more than willing to hear him out. The dude has a very dry and sarcastic sense of humor, which helped him gel pretty well with Alan. Now, Space Racer was initially not ready to get involved in the Viltrumite War, but after having a conversation with Thetis, he agreed to it as it was for a good reason. Plus, they really did need him in the fight, because you did see how he just blasted a portion off a Viltrumite's body with the shot of an Infinity Ray directed at them, right? With him, the Coalition of Planets could be able to turn the tide of the war in their favor, and that's why they were pretty okay with Space Racer choosing to act on his own terms while still being a part of the Coalition and helping them out long after the war against the Viltrum Empire. Now, coming to his distinctive appearance, Space Racer is a striking green alien who has a head with 3 eyes set in a horizontal line, all protected by a clear dome helmet that gives him the classic science fiction vibe needed for a character of his accord. He wears a sleek, form-fitting spacesuit with a bold yellow upper section covering his chest and arms, while the lower half shifts into a darker brown tone, including his legs and gloves. The suit's not just for the sake of style, though. It's very practical, too, with its built-in utility details and a chest emblem that adds a bit more gravitas to his personality. To top that off, there are 2 brown stripes running along each upper arm to give the design some extra flair. His gloved hands and large, clawed feet also play a role in enhancing the slightly animalistic edge of his character design, and his tall, muscular build make him feel powerful even at a glance. Space Racer shares a mental connection with all his personal gear. So what Space Racer shares is a mild type of technopathy that is only limited to his own personal equipment or gear. All he really needs is a mere thought to summon his gun directly into his hand, or even manifest his hoverbike to autonomously approach him. But his mental connection is only limited to the gear he owns. I think there's some kind of special technological bond, or maybe a neural bond, as he doesn't have full control over any digital systems or external machinery. I think the greatest example of this was seen in Invincible comic issue number 66, right when Nolan and Alan were about to approach the site Space Racer was buried in. When Alan asked why Nolan didn't just take Space Racer's gun along with him, instead of just letting it rot in the same place for 100 years, Nolan clarified that Space Racer has some kind of a bond with his gun, meaning that if anyone tried to take it or use it, just like Thor and his hammer, the Infinity Ray would simply fly back to the center of the pile of rubble that Space Racer was buried under, in order to give him a chance to escape by blasting his way out. So Nolan really had no other option but to leave it exactly where he had dropped it when the alien was still alive. In fact, during his time on Earth with Debbie, Nolan documented this in his book, The Memoirs of a Space Adventurer, where he chronicled his fight with Space Racer by disguising himself as Space Rider. Not just that, in the next issue itself, after Nolan apologizes to the alien and seemingly convinces him to join their cause, we see Space Racer's hoverbike manifest out of nowhere, as he probably summoned it with a single thought, even after having it probably float in the vastness of space for 100 years. Cool, right? Space Racer's Infinity Ray Gun is capable of destroying anything. Without his Infinity Ray Gun, I think Space Racer would be just another random green alien, wearing an armor to fight the Viltrumites, but his gun is what makes this guy the real GOAT. The Infinity Ray fires indestructible blasts that can shoot through anything and everything, but the real catch is that only Space Racer can fire this gun, and nobody else. Like I said, the gun is mentally linked to him, so in order to aim a shot at someone, all Space Racer really needs to do is form a thought. We've already seen how one energy blast from the gun aimed directly towards a Viltrumite burnt a chunk out of him, similar to how I would bite a chunk out of a crisp apple. From being able to annihilate entire armies, to obliterate suns, to even destroying a whole planet, the Infinity Gun can do it all, but only when it's being wielded and used by someone that it deems worthy, because the unworthy ones clearly get zapped by its electricity before it flies into the hand of its rightful owner. Sadly, we never really get to find out the history of the Infinity Ray in terms of who created it and for what purpose, as that information is clearly lost to the ravages of time. All we know is that at some point in his very long life, Space Racer came to possess a weapon that can cut through all powerful cosmic beings. It's also said that very long ago, while he was running from a massive extraterrestrial force in deep space, Space Racer fired the Infinity Ray at them. That blast not only devastated his pursuers, but also destroyed a nearby sun. So it is really remarkable how he survived that impact. That's exactly why the Viltrumites were scared of him, as the destructive power of the Infinity Ray has become legendary throughout the galaxy. Of course, that was before Nolan buried the guy under a pile of rocks after strategically getting him to drop his guns. But I've noticed one thing, and that's how Space Racer is rarely seen to use the gun casually, which means he understands the responsibility that comes from being the wielder of the Infinity Ray, and hence uses it with restraint. I think the coolest thing I've seen the Infinity Ray do is destroy an entire planet, which, spoiler alert, might just happen in the next 2 episodes itself. So in the comics, after Thrag seemingly kills Oliver, when the Coalition takes the fight directly to Viltrum, Thetis decides to use the element of surprise against the Viltrumites while they're all distracted, and orders Space Racer to fire a powerful energy blast directly at the planet of Viltrum. He then grabs Mark away and asks the rest of the crew to move away at a quick pace before the core of the planet stabilizes and ends up killing all of them. Thetis insists everyone stay close so that they could time it perfectly and reach the planet all at the same time, because if the core has time to stabilize, they could all die on impact. Just like that, we then see Space Racer firing his gun to open the planet's core so that the trio can fly through it in order to fully destabilize it. As the gun pierces through the planet, all the Coalition heroes move through it and successfully destroy Viltrum for good. Although they do get caught by a few Viltrumites, the planet's destruction causes a massive shockwave that completely knocks out all the combatants unconscious. As the impact fully obliterates the planet for good, Alan urges all Viltrumites to surrender, and Mark rushes to catch hold of Oliver's floating body amidst the chaos. Just like that, the so-called greatest planet in the universe meets its explosive end because of the sheer ferocity of Space Racer's gun. Just how iconic is that? Space Racer's hoverbike and jetpack are also very cool gear. As you already know, Space Racer's hover motorcycle allows him to reach the farthest corners of the universe, and even beyond, thus making it one of the most advanced and reliable modes of cosmic travel to ever exist. He can summon it with a single thought, and can easily modify it to fire blasts. Space Racer is also one of the most skilled riders in the galaxy, and just the way he handles his advanced hoverbike speaks volumes. We can see it in the show itself that his control is effortless, his movements are sharp and fluid, and his precision in high-speed situations is simply on another level. He has mastered how to pilot his advanced hoverbike, and that level of skill really makes him a dangerous combatant and a true elite among cosmic riders. In addition to that, for his interstellar travels, Space Racer uses a jetpack to fly easily from one location to another, because, it's more efficient than riding a bike. To top that off, he also uses it in an offensive way during combat, such as by dashing against his enemies and slamming them against a wall. I'm really stoked to see Space Racer using all his gear with full force in the upcoming Viltrumite war. Is Space Racer immortal? Well, in the broader sense, I doubt if he's actually immortal, but he does have a rather decelerated aging, just like the Viltrumites. I mean, we've already seen how Space Racer has survived after being trapped inside an asteroid for a century, that too while staying embedded under a rubble of rocks, without showing signs of aging or physical decline. He didn't have any visible source of food or water for 100 years, and yet when Alan offers him his weird snack, Space Racer declines after being grossed out, which implies that the alien could have lived far longer under the same trifling conditions. I'm sure if he had to fight a Viltrumite without his Infinity Ray, Space Racer would have had his guts swirled around like spaghetti. But luckily, even in the comics, we would never have to find that out. Just how powerful is Space Racer? I just want to start by reminding you that the only way Nolan could stop Space Racer was by getting the alien to drop his gun and then swiftly trap him under a pile of rocks. A century later, when Nolan and Alan came looking for the gun, they believed the Infinity Ray had flown back to Space Racer's corpse, only to be surprised by the sight of him being alive underneath all that dirt. So unless you can separate Space Racer from his Infinity Ray gun, I doubt anyone would be able to get to him. And we know just how impossible of a feat that is to achieve. On top of that, Space Racer has exceptional mental discipline, which makes him the most viable candidate for wielding the Infinity Ray. Apparently, he needs to maintain an environment without any distraction and remain very focused in order to fire his gun with precision and without any difficulty. While we can't ignore just how much he relies on his Infinity Ray gun, so far, Space Racer has shown us pretty heavy physical strength, especially when he held off against both Alan and Nolan and even knocked them away when they tried to take his gun from him. He even survived multiple fatal encounters against Thrag in the comics, and survived a punch from that crazy Viltrumite more than once. The Coalition has used Space Racer's skills to spy on Thrag and report back to them for years after he goes into exile during Nolan taking command of the Viltrumites, but that's something we'll probably not see until Season 6. So I'll save you the spoilers for the distant future. Well, that brings us to the very end of this video. Do you think Robert Kirkman should give a bit more screen time to Space Racer and write him in as someone who's a bit more important than being just another super powerful supporting character? I personally would certainly love a backstory of this guy, but what do you guys think? Let us know about your thoughts and opinions in the comment box below.